So we're LaNovaMobilitat, still in Valencia at the eMobility World Congress, and we have a special guest, John Moavenzadeh, the executive director of the mobility initiative of the MIT, or the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, from Boston. You came to Valencia to explain us this holistic view of the urban mobility. We just saw this morning your keynote with the several trends, I think there was a very nice view. You said mobility has to be safe. Help me, clean,
And
and
inclusive. That's
inclusive.
right.
Yes. Um, could you just make a short, because we are talking here at the e-mobility about electrification, and it seems like all the solution is to make electrification or even with hydrogen, maybe some synthetic fuels. But urban
Yeah.
mobility won't be solve the problems we have, congestion, only with the car. No, how could you say in these several trends we see, what could we apply in the urban mobility in cities like in Europe, in Spain, Valencia, Barcelona?
Sure. So our starting point at the MIT Mobility Initiative is that mobility is actually a complex system. And so by defining those three system objectives, safe, clean, and inclusive, it decouples the policy approach, it decouples the technology capability, it decouples business models. It first says, what do we actually want to achieve, right? And then we figure out the ways to get to those goals of safe, clean, and inclusive. Inclusive, really fundamentally meaning affordability
Mm-hmm.
and access for all.
Mhm. So also affordable in terms of economics, no?
Yeah.
Um, I think Mikael has more specific questions, but for me, there was also a takeaway um, in your keynote, which it was mobility is not only the target. The target is actually that the people are getting education, are getting their
Yeah,
food.
it's gaining
Yeah,
access,
it's
right?
gaining
So,
access.
I've spent my career in transportation
Yeah,
and I'm very passionate about mobility, but one could make the argument that mobility in and of itself
yeah.
doesn't really matter so much. What matters is that people can have access to education, to healthcare, to jobs, to food, to
Mm,
the goods that they need to, to lead happy and
mm,
productive lives. And mobility is one of three pathways to get there, the other two being proximity, which is
mm-hmm,
why 10,000 years ago we decided to live in cities.
mm-hmm,
And more recently, the various forms of electronic communications
mm-hmm,
connectivity. So, obviously, we saw with COVID, we all went onto Zoom calls.
mm,
We can continue to gain that access that we need through
mm-hmm,
through other means. And sometimes we see a distinct balancing between those modalities.
mm,
Sometimes, for example, increasing the mobility within a city can actually come at a cost of decreased proximity.
mm-hmm,
And what I mean by that is if you think about the urban form of a city, the more square meters that you dedicate to streets, to parking, to all of the sort of infrastructure required to enhance surface mobility,
mm-hmm,
that can come at a cost of proximity. It's
mm-hmm,
hard to cross a 7-lane highway, right? It's not
okay,
something you want to do as a pedestrian.
no,
So there are these inherent trade-offs within
mm-hmm,
the transportation system that we need to think about.
thank you. Then let's focus maybe now on safety. I think, Miguel, you had some questions.
Yeah, I have a couple points on safety. I mean, you showed the evolution of the accidents in the US, which they are increasing in the last couple of years. In Europe, we have a different trend
Yes.
where we're going down. You showed the impact that the large pickup trucks, SUVs like this. How did you call the word for uh,
Car bloat or
that
would be one.
that was it. That was it.
The
Yeah.
Yes,
weight
yeah,
itself, no?
yeah, yeah.
So Do you think this is something it's going to be solved by technology, like putting more sensors, more compute in the cars, having better solutions for that, or is it what or what are there other
So
components to that?
my instinct is certainly technology can help, but I don't think the core solution would revolve around technology. The core issue is that there's two issues. One is that the safety figures, the fatality figures, as you pointed out, in the United States are absolutely moving in the wrong direction. So we have increased from roughly 35,000 fatalities just 10 or 12 years ago to now 43,000. And that's deeply concerning. That's a significant increase over a relatively short period of time. The second is that if you look within that data, you see the increase of what we call vulnerable road users. These are effectively pedestrians and cyclists that are killed in involving automobile accidents. That portion of the data has increased even more substantially. It's around 13% in the last NHTSA count. So then the question is why, right? What's driving this? And I don't think it's unreasonable that the larger and heavier and more, what would be the right word, sort of blinded vehicles are contributing to that. So there are blind spots when you drive a larger vehicle. The A pillar is beefier, you're higher up, it's harder to see, particularly during, there's a number of the Insurance Highway Safety Institute has done a number of studies about right hand turns, left hand turns, blocked visibility. So I think that is a contributing factor. So coming from sort of the making it more difficult to see these vulnerable road users, and then on the other side, of course, is the vehicle is heavier and higher and therefore more dangerous. So when collisions do happen, there's a highly higher likelihood of fatality. So if you want to do root cause analysis, yes, I mean, technology can contribute, but a far more simpler solution is just to move toward smaller vehicles, which, there's a number of negative externalities associated with larger vehicles. They take up more room on our streets, they're heavier, they do more wear and tear on our roads and so forth. So I think that's sort of the core issue to me.
That's something that could be incentivized by regulation also, right?
It could most, I mean, there's three ways to change human behavior, right? There's the norms and the values that we hold about what is right and what is wrong. There is pricing, which is a very powerful incentive to change human behavior. And then there are rules that we set. And, those three levers can all be used, I think, in a perhaps more thoughtful way. We're seeing it with pricing. I mean, we will have so called congestion pricing. It's actually cordon pricing, but congestion pricing coming to New York City this year.
Oh,
So this is a significant development in the kind of, I mean, of course, this has been in Stockholm and London and Singapore and many other cities around the world for 2 decades, but it's coming to the United States. Los Angeles is looking at it. As we move forward and we grapple with this incredible cost of mobility, both from the financial side and from the sort of human side, I think we will have to explore more of these options about how do we intelligently price mobility to incentivize better, safer, cleaner outcomes for all of us.
since we're on Xavier, we have a follow-up one. You also brought up the AV failure, the failure modes for AVs. So recently we had quite some news about that. Autonomous vehicles. With Waymo last week, Cruise a couple months ago that had the consequence of the CEO resigning and a whole reshuffling in the company and the positioning of Mary Barra or GM in terms of Cruise. So what do you think? Do you think it's going to be a setback on the scaling of robotaxi solutions across
Yeah,
cities? No, like we saw Austin was coming up, Miami also. Like now it looks like it's slowing down. What do you think?
it I believe it is a setback. But I think long term, I am just as optimistic as ever about the opportunity that autonomous technology affords. And I don't think we should throw out the safety baby with the sort of these troubling incidents bathwater. So what I mean by that is I mean, we still going back to the 43,000 people killed every year on the roads of the United States and the 1.2 to 1.3 million people killed every year on the roads of the world, I very fundamentally believe that autonomous technology can help to dramatically reduce those figures. And it's behooving on us to pursue that technology to its fullest. Now, yes, I mean, what we have witnessed over the past year with, everything from the collapse of Argo AI to other, all of the series of unfortunate incidents with crews and other AV operators, it clearly is a setback. But this technology will develop. And it's the United States has a significant, strong position. It's up to us if we want to give this away to other players out there. And other players, and specifically, there's amazing work that's happening in China and has been happening for some time. I mean, I was impressed in 2018 when I visited Baidu and looked at what they were doing. So, yeah, it's up to us if we want to give this away. It's an important technology. It really can save people's lives and it can improve access as well. I mean, if you're somebody who has some sort of a disability where it's difficult for you to drive or you simply cannot drive, this technology offers a solution for that.
Yeah, even so, something I saw in San Francisco, there was also women. They would much prefer go back home with a robot driving than with a male driver, which may have like safety concerns about it. So there are groups of
There's
targeted
social
groups,
implicate.
social
Absolutely.
implications that
Yeah.
are totally
Yeah.
private.
Great. You were talking about China. You were talking about the adoption of autonomous driving. Um, at the same time, from China, there are coming the new electric vehicles, very quite cheap. Um, and we see in the last months, let's say, a kind of slowdown of the sales of sales figures of electric vehicle. Is it that like the autonomous driving, let's say, just short time
Yeah.
that like every new innovation in the market has to, let's say, still to grow and come back stronger?
I think that's right. I would characterize what we've seen in autonomous mobility as a setback. It's
Mm-hmm.
significant, but with time we will get through it. It
Okay.
may take a year or 2 years or what have you, but we will pass through it. I think that what we're seeing with electrification in the United States is more of a pause, a
Mm-hmm.
briefer, less deep, shorter hesitation in the
Mm-hmm.
market as consumers realize the different modalities of operating an electric vehicle. It's that I didn't get the range I expected. It's cold outside, and where's my range?
Mm-hmm.
And just sort of learning about sort of the and realizing that the charging infrastructure is still absolutely inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
There are steps certainly being taken.
Mm-hmm.
There's smart people in Washington and other places that are working on this and addressing it, but
Mm-hmm.
we haven't gotten there yet. We don't have the reliability, we don't have the ubiquity in the charging infrastructure that we need
Mm-hmm.
yet. But I think we're moving in that direction. I know here in Europe
Mm-hmm.
there's also similar challenges
Yes,
with charging infrastructure.
infrastructure and also with the vehicles which are getting better and better with much more autonomy and much more let's say electric range. um,
But one of the points I was trying to make today is that you can't just map our automotive experience with gasoline and
mm,
petrol
mm,
vehicles onto electric vehicles. So,
mhm,
that it we're used to this kind of fueling infrastructure where we drive a car for depending on your usage, a couple days, maybe even a couple of weeks, and then you go to a petrol station and you refuel, and that's it, you're
Mhm.
done. A very different modality for operating an electric vehicle, and the starting point is not so much like, what type of vehicle do I want. The starting point in many ways is, where do I live? Where
Mhm.
will this vehicle reside? Where will it be parked? Where can does it have access to this
Mhm.
type of gradual continuous charging?
Mhm.
A friend of mine, Alex Grusin, who's the CEO of Ytricity,
Mhm.
calls it a sort of power snacking
Okay.
concept. We're used to, with gas vehicles, we're used to power meals where we
Meal.
eat a full meal and then we have all sorts of time to
The big
digest.
meal, no?
This is more with electric vehicles, it's more like power snacking, like you might do with your phone. You
Mhm.
might charge your phone in during the daytime and
Mhm.
just top it off a little bit. That it's a different modality.
So it's also maybe good for our, let's say, fitness. Just let me ask a little bit more, and then I will give it over to you. Um, but you were explaining that this conversion or transition to the electric mobility for the customer might be a kind of generational thing. So the people until now are used to drive gasoline cars. Our children are won't be able
Absolutely.
anymore. No.
Absolutely.
So.
Yes, I do think you'll see that. I mean, this is a transitional period where we're educating people. People are learning. And of course, it's a moving target. The vehicles themselves are getting better all the time. So, I think this is just a transitional period to this new technology.
Maybe just a final question. I was interested. You mentioned about some POCs you are doing with different like small vehicles around the world, and one of them was with Silence. It's a electric motorbike company from Catalonia. So anything you can comment about these activities? What was the goal of these different POCs you are doing?
Yeah, so MIT had done some very interesting work. There was a project at the Media Lab to build this so-called folding car, which is a dramatically new form factor vehicle, where it occupies, I don't know, something like 1/5 of the area to park the vehicle when it's folded up. And I mean, my only point was, I think we need to encourage and to continue that type of thinking. So we the automobile, and I said this in my talk. I mean, I love cars. I started my career as an engineer at a car company at Ford, but I don't think that the personal use automobile is an optimal solution for urban mobility in dense urban cores, right? I mean, it's an extremely heavy structure that's 10 to 20 times the weight of the occupants that are typically moved within it. It takes up a very large footprint on our city streets, which, as I tried to emphasize, are a precious resource. So in fact, if going back to the pricing construct, I can imagine a world, 10, 20, 50 years from now in different places where you do pay by usage on the street, and if you drive a larger vehicle, you pay more. If you drive a heavier vehicle, you pay more, right? Because we're trying to price out the negative externalities of mobility. Mobility in itself is great. It's a wonderful thing to be able to move and to interact with people and to have that access that I tried to emphasize. So it's not the mobility that we want to reduce, it's the negative externalities of
Mm,
the mobility that we want to reduce.
okay, I think it's a great way to end our interview. Thanks a lot, John, for taking the
You
time.
bet. Thanks so much. Great to be here with you guys.
Thank
Have a
you.
great rest of the show. Bye bye.